Gonna do a sound check. Okay, cool. We are live. Is the camera on? Willow, do we need a camera? Is that a thing? Oh, it's there. Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Cool. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for turning up. Svelte London, March 2025, and the slides are all legit. So let's just do the housekeeping quickly, and then we'll do thanks to our hosts, Planes. Housekeeping, toilet, go out the door. They're on the right. You can see men's and women's just further down there. We've got food and drinks. Everyone's well acquainted with that already. Housekeeping done. Code of conduct. By mere fact of being here, you have agreed to the Svelte Society code of conduct, as all communities should have a code of conduct. Anyone who is basically being a dick, reach out to me or Willow. Have we got any other ambassadors here? No? Me or Willow or Enrico, and we will fix it. Cool. So Svelte Society London is a community funded event. So if you want to donate to help go towards the pizza and the beer, just scan that link. Thank you very much. Okay, so we need to thank our hosts, Planes. Enrico and Hannah, thank you very much for organising this for us, and also for having me work here today. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much. So we've got 2 talks this evening. But before we do that, just see the next slide. We're here to talk about Svelte Summit in May. There's no discount codes, no offers. You've got to buy the ticket full price, unfortunately. If you haven't done already, I foolishly bought mine on the day they were released, not knowing I could have had a discount and stuff like that. So, but I've got one, so yay. Anyway, also I've got a shout out to our community partner who have got a 20% off for CityJS in London, the 25th, I think, of next month. So if you can scan that if you need to. And if you're going, I'll see you there. Okay, schedule for this evening. I thought it'd be funny just to do something, but we're not doing vibe coding. No. We're going to talk about SvelteKit and SST with Enrico. He's going to talk us through working with that here at Planes, and it was, from what I heard from him, sounds very interesting. I've not worked with it myself. I sort of understand what it is, so looking forward to that. And Mythbusters, we've got Willow who's going to give us a talk on that. So that's it. It's in the slides. Let's get started. So Enrico, do you want to come and do your thing? You know how to?
Yep.
Cool. The music.
Oh yeah, let me turn the music off. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
Just for a bit of ambience, but
Yeah.
there we are.
Let's hope we don't get.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Whoops. Sorry.
That's all good. Okay. Cool. Oh yeah, that could be useful. Okay. Oh no. This one. Ah. Here we go. Okay. Oh.
One of 27 slides.
Sorry, bear with me one quick moment.
Oh.
Haven't. Cool. Perfect. Okay. Let's crack on. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining today. My name's Enrico, and today I'm going to be chatting about building a full stack SvelteKit app using SST. Oh, that's all good. Initially, I was actually going to be talking about integrating real-time aspects to it as well, but then I realized after planning the talk, I got 35 minutes in and hadn't even touched the real-time aspect. I was like, okay, maybe I'll say that for a part 2 if you all like that. Also realized I haven't capitalized the K in SvelteKit, so I hope no one's angry at me. Yeah. Oh no, not off to a great start. Cool. Oh. Hey, how do I do full screen here? Is this it? Here we go. Easy, nice. So I mean, this is me. I have two wolves inside of me. No, I find that every person has two wolves inside of them. You have the developer who loves engineering, lots and lots of projects for fun, for learning, trying to go as deep into the problem as possible. Then you also have the developer who wants to ship features really, really quickly. You don't want to have to faff around with setting up your frameworks. You just want to get something to your users. And those wolves are always in battle with one another. And so the challenge with that kind of inner conflict is when it comes to picking tooling. So for instance, if you're thinking about ways to say deploy your application, you could go all of the way to the AWS side of things, which is one of the more complex options. We have complete control over every aspect of the of your services. You have access to loads of different services. You can tweak all sorts of knobs and controls. And then on the other side, you've got these kind of more fully managed tools like Netlify and Vercel, and their developer experiences excellent, where you could literally run a single script in the command line, and then your application is just alive on the web. And so this isn't really an accurate, too accurate. I've used a little bit of DigitalOcean, but it's kind of just discussing that a lot of these tools fall in a continuum. If you want to get something quickly, you might use one of the tools on the left. If you want to dive deep or have more complex requirements, you might use the tools on the right. And the bits at the bottom here are actually about the real-time part of the talk that I won't be talking about now. So I won't talk too much about REST APIs, WebSockets, GraphQL. But what I do want to bring your attention to is this kind of sweet spot in the middle where you can get something up and running quickly while still having a lot of control over some of the more fine-grained details. So we're going to jump back to this slide in a little bit. But before I do, I just want to kind of give you a very brief intro about me. My name is Enrico Carula, and I'm a senior developer here at Plains. I am currently working on building an application for a private members club. And during this project, I introduced the SST, which is a tool I'll be talking about in this call. And it's the first time we're using SST at Plains, and I'm quite a big fan of it, so excited to share about that. I don't normally build mobile applications. I'm actually a very big advocate of using browser-based technologies like Svelte. Yeah, snaps all around. Let's go. I'm a big fan of browser-based technologies. So SvelteKit is my go-to whenever I'm building a web project, and I'm slowly trying to integrate it a little bit more in our Plains projects. But so far, not too successful, but we'll see. I've also worked at companies like Anima, who have done design to code automation. And funny enough, they actually worked closely with the Bolt team, which did have a really successful launch on Product Hunt. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the folks at Anima about that. And finally, I'm the creator of Component Odyssey, which is a course about building a component library that works in any framework, specifically teaching you the basics of web components and kind of some of the tools around building those, building with them. So if you're interested in that, then please reach out and I'll tell you a little bit more. And also just want to say that I'm part of Plains and we're a digital product agency. So we do all sorts of things like help with design strategy, product strategy, and also developing digital products. We work with lots of individual creators and also very large companies as well, like banks and airports. Cool. So again, this was supposed to be a two-part talk about building full-stack real-time applications, but I've had to shelve the real-time aspect just because I have a habit of talking a lot. Cool. So the talk here is mainly about building and deploying a full stack application. And I think the term full stack is incredibly loaded. Like, what does it mean? Like, I'm sure if you ask everyone in this room what full stack means, you get slightly different answers. And I feel like it's difficult. Like, I don't want to try and define it too much either, because again, like, there are people that are going to be left out. But I would consider myself a full stack developer because I build like front ends that connect with back ends, and maybe I've spin up like databases as well and define the schemas and then manage the infrastructure as well. But like, more of like a jack of all trades, master of none, because if I was working in a much larger company that really needs to specialize in one thing, maybe I won't be of much use there. So if that's still like quite a nebulous idea of what like a full stack engineer is, hopefully the next slide will kind of clear things up. So if you are a full stack developer, you basically need to learn all of these things. Otherwise, are you even a developer? So you've got to learn all about, what's this over here? Regular expressions. If you're not an expert in regular expressions, then you got to level up there. And also Java, you've got to learn all the Java frameworks too. But for real, like, oh, sorry, did someone? Yeah, zoom in, yeah. So in this talk, we're going to go through all of these things one at a time in great detail. So this is like my kind of, for the sake of this talk, just kind of what I'm going to be defining what full stack is. So it's like a simplified full stack where say a developer like myself is building a web application or maybe a mobile application, and that web application talks with a server. And that server might live like in a separate like location, and it performs like some processing, or maybe talks to a database, and maybe like does some CRUD operations against that database. And that database is maybe, say, a persistent data store that's, again, hosted in a separate location from your server, and then your server communicates with it. And then finally, maybe you're dealing with hosting all of these different services and making sure that they communicate with one another easily. And maybe, if you want to go deeper, you're dealing with scaling and reliability and so on. So it's a very broad like spectrum, and it can go really deep or quite shallow as well. Like, you can do all of these 4 things just using a handful of like platforms too. I'm going to be talking about that in a little bit. So that is a lot to consider for like a solo developer. I'm sure a lot of us like to tinker on the sides, and we like to build applications that we then publish. But like managing your own full stack application without using any of these platforms can be really, really difficult and time consuming. Let's kind of go through the different levels of these, of like complexity when it comes to building a full stack application. So here we have like level 1, you're building everything from scratch. And does anyone know why I've got the apple pie on the screen? Yes, Carl Sagan quote, my favorite quote. And the quote goes, if you want to build an apple pie from scratch, first you must create the universe. And so what I guess I'm trying to say here is like, I'm not going to be talking about writing assembly code to build your servers and your front ends. I'm just going to like keep it at a baseline of just, writing Node, deploying that to maybe AWS, EC2 or whatever. But yeah, I'm not going to be going any deeper than that. So when I talk about like building everything from scratch, I'm kind of like thinking about how much of it we handle ourselves. So we've got like your 4 little sections over here, your front end, back end, database, and infrastructure. And then we've got this key on the top left here. And so if it's a circle, it means we're handling all of that complexity ourselves. If it's a triangle, then we're partially managing it. And if it's a star, it means we're using a service that completely takes care of a lot of the like the managing and the details. So if we are managing it ourselves, as you can guess, everything there is a circle. And so, like, say you've decided to build your application with like vanilla JavaScript, or maybe using like a build tool to get it all web friendly. And then you're building like a Node server, which you're then like hooking up with a separate server that runs like a SQL database, and then you're deploying that to AWS, and you've got to make sure that they're all talking one another, like setting up security groups and like VPCs and subnets and all that kind of complicated stuff. Like, that's kind of like the most complex way of approaching the problem. And like, you learn a ton from doing that. And it's great if you're working on a project that has like very, very specific requirements. Maybe you're not doing something as novel as just like building like a standard website that, you know, maybe reads and writes some user data. But again, if you've got lots of developers on your team, then it's a great way to like use your skill sets and divide and conquer. But again, like there are a lot of downsides to that. It does require a lot of time and effort. And I think for me, the most difficult thing is when you build something in this way, forget about it for 4 years, come back to make a change because someone's like, it breaks, and now you've completely forgotten how it all works, and you've lost all your security keys because you're, you know, 3 laptops, you know, 3 laptops in the past. So that's like one of the bigger challenges. So let's move on to level 3. And I've skipped level 2 because I'll be coming back to that in a little bit. Like level 3 is when you start using frameworks and like platforms as a service. That's what the PaaS stands for, to kind of offload a lot of that complexity. And so in this example, you can kind of use different tools to cover different things. Maybe you're using Prisma to handle like your database. But in this example, let's say we're using SvelteKit and we're using Vercel. So SvelteKit helps us spin up our front ends, and it also gives you like a server that's tightly coupled to your front end. And then, you know, you plug it into Vercel, which knows how to like deploy a SvelteKit application nice and easily, but maybe you don't have as much control over tweaking the fine details. It's like a great way of just getting something whipped up nice and quickly. But you're not using, like in this case, any database tooling. So now you've got to worry about like spinning up a database, managing the schemas, and ensuring that it's deployed in a sensible way. And so this is a great option for teams that want to get something up and running nice and quickly. And it's probably going to cover most of the most common scenarios. But then like you have issues as like restrictions on what you can do and which services you want to use. Maybe AWS is brought out this fancy new service that you want to play with, but maybe Vercel hasn't quite hooked up any sort of like any way to use it. And so it's has its like pros and cons. And then there's like level 4 where you start using more and more like tools to kind of go to kind of abstract over those complexities. And it's pretty much like more of the same. Like maybe you're using like Supabase that handles all of your backend and your database. And again, you're using Vercel to manage your front end. And so I won't spend too much time here, but it's kind of like, again, the same. You're spinning up things a lot more quickly, but then you're relying on a lot more external providers. And so you have the limitations that come with that. So now to the kind of the meat of the talk, where we're talking about level 2, which is in this case like SvelteKit and SST. So you're using SvelteKit to manage your front end and your back end, and you're using SST, which is a command line tool to spin up infrastructure in AWS. And you can just write a little bit of code to define, say, your database schemas and how you want to run your SvelteKit server, and it does all of the heavy lifting for you. So what is SST? So I mentioned it is a command line tool, but the nice thing is that it lets you define your infrastructure as code. If anyone here has used a tool called Terraform, it's like that, but like without like the hundreds and hundreds of lines of code. You know, you can get something up and running in like 10 lines of code. And they have like these nice plugins as well, or providers, I think they're called, that allow you to handle some of the more common scenarios. Like if you have a Next.js application or a SvelteKit application, you can just plug right into it. A lot of flexibility as well, because it's infrastructure as code. You can kind of like go inside of your code base and make tweaks. Maybe you want to change the machine that you're using in AWS and all of this, handle serverless and different kind of architecture styles. And one of the best things about it is that it's excellent like developer experience. So it has TypeScript support out of the box. If you're using secrets, then all of the developers who are working on the project get access to those secrets as well without having to run additional scripts, and everything's all type safe. And it's also really easy to run your servers locally while still spinning up some infrastructure in AWS at the same time. And I'll talk about that a little bit more actually, because that's a really interesting part. So this is what my SST config file looks like in my SvelteKit application. So I've just created a really straightforward SvelteKit application using the CLI tools that you get from the website. And I just copy and pasted something similar to this. And so the top bit here is just some metadata related to your project, so the name of the project and which provider you're using. So this could be like AWS, and I think it supports DigitalOcean, I might be wrong on that, or Cloudflare. And then up here, you define some of your infrastructure things. So you do need like, a little bit of like knowledge of how things work, but then the documentation for SST kind of runs through getting set up here. So what I've done here, cool, so you can see my mouse. So I've defined a VPC, which is essentially like a virtual network that isolates your infrastructure from the rest of the internet. That means that people, if you host your server on within a VPC, people from outside of the VPC, like outside of the network, can't start connecting to it. It does things like set up a bunch of like security defaults as well that you would otherwise have to do manually. And if you don't do them manually, then it can cause like some pretty significant security concerns. Underneath, you're basically, here we go, defining a service. And this service is basically like where you'll be running your server. So it will use Docker to create a container for it. And then that container will then be managed by a cluster. And this cluster could have multiple containers inside of it. And so you can see that we're passing through the VPC to the cluster, which means we want to have like the cluster running inside of the VPC. And then you've got like, you're just associating the cluster with the service. And then once you do that and run the developer or the deploy script, then everything just kind of like then kind of works in the background. So let's see. Oh yeah. So this should have been a couple of slides earlier, but like with this SST and this, oh sorry, I think someone's trying to call me. Let me just hang up. Oh, that's my mum. I'll give her a call after. I will, yeah, I'll tell her how lovely you all are and how amazing today's been. So yeah, sorry. So we kind of spoke a little bit about these different like levels of abstraction. So you can see with like SvelteKit and SST, you're basically just kind of going a level higher. It kind of manages a lot of the complexities, but at the same time, you have the option to kind of go as deep as you want with like things like the infrastructure and managing your databases too. So let's see it in action. So I'm just going to open up my project. And so I have, let me just zoom in a bit more as well. Cool. So I'm assuming most of you folks here are familiar with this really fancy tool called SvelteKit, which I'm a big fan of. Yeah, shout out, let's go. So you've got your standard, bunch of routes over here as well, like an API endpoint. Then I've got all my components here as well. So nothing fancy there. But the only main difference, well, there are two key things. The first is that that SST config I showed you there. And the second thing is just like a Docker file, which will then build that to a container, which will then deploy. I won't go too much into Docker, but it's just basically a way of ensuring that we can run like our application in any sort of environment. So now I've set up my my SST config. I can then run npx SST dev. And what this is going to do is set up this cool like multiplexer terminal. And you can see it says here at the bottom, deploy and deploying. And so what it's doing is that it's then deploying a lot of the infrastructure to AWS. So I've connected my AWS account already. And so if I've hooked up things like databases, if I've hooked up things like secrets, if I've hooked up things like configuration around routing, like that will get set up in AWS. And so if I were to go in the AWS console, I can see that stuff living there. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't like deploy any of your, say, like your cloud functions or your server there. What it does instead do is runs it all locally. And you can see here, if we go here, you can see that it's just like running the Vite script, just as you normally would in when running a SvelteKit project. But then it then has this like a tunnel that connects to the like inside of your VPC. So you can do things like deploy your database to AWS, and then your front end, which runs locally, and your back end, which runs locally, can then start interacting with it. You don't have to run like a local version of your database to start testing things. So it's almost like you've got a production-ready environment in development. So for folks that have had to run like Docker Compose scripts and set up like huge batches of infrastructure, that just never seems to work as easy as the README likes to say it does. This is like a nice way to kind of mimic production more. So let's go ahead and check it out. If I go over to localhost 5173, actually, sorry, I'm just covering my wrong screen. Okay, let's go back here. Cool. So I've got this little website, and if I click it, it starts off this little Andrikos 2000, which is a little operating system thing I whipped up. It actually has a little startup screen as well, startup sound rather. Let's see if we can, is it loud? Maybe the sound's muted, but oh, it doesn't sound, it's all right. But what it does do, it has like a little MSN type thing, and this is like the real-time aspect. So if I were to actually open up a new browser, I'm using this fancy tool called server-sent events to ensure that we can communicate to whoever's connected to whoever's opened our SvelteKit app. But that is out of scope of this talk, because otherwise it would be much longer than the 30-minute slot I have. Maybe next time, who knows? So that is the like running it locally. So really the only overhead you need as a developer is to hook up your AWS account to your like computer, and then you can kind of start running along with it nicely. So once I've finished developing, I can do a similar script where I write npx SST deploy and then specify which stage I want to deploy to. So I've got like a production environment. And so it will basically run the same thing, but set up all the infrastructure. But because I have like run it before, like it's not going to like tear down everything and then reinitialize it. Instead, it will just kind of reuse as much infrastructure as it can. But you can see what's happening now. It's like looked for the Docker file, and it's now building it, and then it's going to run it inside of a container in AWS. So this usually takes like a few minutes, and I won't bore you all with the details here. But once that kind of gets set up, that completes, it then gives you like a link that you can, oh, sorry. How long have you had your hand open for?
Not long.
Oh, okay, cool.
But it was ever since you went, it's doing this stuff on the server. Is that, you say it's not tearing it down, so is it using local assets and pushing those to AWS?
So say, for instance, we've got this, so like a good example is like secrets. Say I wanted to define like a secret, and you can do that like here. I think there's like a way to be like, yeah, like a new secret or something. And so the secret is set up in, so the secret is then sent to AWS, where it is like, it lives as like an encrypted value. And then if you change that secret, then it like, replaces the existing value with a new one. But then if you haven't changed the secret and you're running this deploy script, it just like skips the process of like setting up that infrastructure again. And the same goes for most of these things. Like for instance, like this VPC, I'm not changing at all. So there's no need to like tear it down and set it up again. It just reuses the same one. But for instance, this service, if I made a change to my code, it's going to run it like, kind of make a few changes as well. On top of that.
So it still builds it on the server?
Yeah, it's all like, it's all built on the cloud.
Yep.
So yeah, and another cool thing it does actually, and this is without like defining anything, is that if you have like a static folder with your assets, it kind of recognizes that automatically, and then will create like an S3 bucket, and then where it hosts all of those static assets again in the cloud. Cool. I'm good actually for now. I think I'll top up my water a little bit after. But yeah, so you can see like the whole deployment has gone through. You can see it updated an existing service, but it didn't like tear it down. And so if I go ahead and open this up, it all lives live. So this is live, and if you were to go on SSA app service, blah, 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 you could see this live. So yeah, again, and then the real-time aspect also still works nicely. So Another cool nicety about it is that it sets up a thing called the SST console. So if I go over here, oh no. Cool. So these are all the projects I've got on my AWS account. For some reason, the one I deployed just now isn't connecting to the console. I don't know exactly why. So let's just pretend it has. But let's have a look at this one here. Like this is a similar application I built. So it has similar infrastructure, except it's got like a database as well. And it's basically just going to give you a list of all of the infrastructure that you've used to set it up. And so there's like about 100 things in here, and this is the kind of things that you would need to consider if you're using AWS directly without any sort of any sort of tooling. So like I don't understand what half of this stuff is, and I never hope to. But what's interesting is that you can see it's like set up these DynamoDB tables. You can see that it's like, there are probably like some secrets and some S3 buckets as well. But like this is a good example that I've written about, say, 20 lines of SST configuration code, and it's setting up all of this stuff that I don't need to worry about, but I could configure if I wanted to. Another cool thing is that it shows all of the CloudFront logs. So if someone's like triggering an error, I can see that in here, and I think I can get emailed about it as well, but I might be wrong there. And you can see someone's trying to break into my backend by querying like find the robots txt file to kind of see, I guess, all of the little like a list of routes that they maybe can try and break into, but I do not have any. Okay, so oh, is it Google that's doing it? Okay. Ah. Oh, you're completely right. I was thinking of the sitemap, because I know a lot of people, when I've not tried to break into anything, but when I've tried to see what's available publicly, I try and go on the sitemap. But I noticed actually a few days back, someone tried to like hit the WP includes, which is like what hackers try and do when they think you have a WordPress backend. Sorry, that's so yeah. So that's pretty much like a little intro to SST. But so, I mentioned earlier that I'm working at Plains. So the current project I'm working on is to build an application and a server that replaces an existing application and a server. And so so what we wanted to do is ensure that we kind of keep everything on the AWS platform, but try and just like not scare our client that we're gonna, make huge sweeping changes and ensure that like whatever other services they have on AWS we can still communicate with, which is why we didn't use a tool like say Vercel or Netlify. But on top of that, like there is like good developer experience. I think in the previous version of the project they used Terraform. And like if we want to build something nice and quickly and then be able to have like a bunch of developers come in and make changes, I don't think Terraform is like the best approach, because I think there's
How much is it costing you?
So it costs you as much as it would do for hosting your stuff on AWS. So it's like a CLI tool that acts as a middleman.
Yeah.
So there's no like pricing with SST unless you start like using their console for lots and lots of different like projects, and then like the pricing they charge that way.
Okay.
But if you have experience with AWS, that's pretty much like how much you're going to be paying. So I think I ran a project on SST and AWS, full stack application, and I think it cost about like £30 for the month.
Okay.
But like there are free ways that you can.
And how exactly do you like redeploy a new version of your app? Do you just git commit and it detects it, or do you need to set up a GitHub action? Or
You can do actually. So we set up like GitHub Actions to handle deployments, which basically runs this npx SST deploy.
okay.
If I were to go ahead in my SvelteKit page application and change something, it would recognize that there's been a change. So it builds that Docker file, the Docker image from scratch, and then deploys that to AWS. And then by default, it does like a blue-green deployment. So in the sense that there's the old application which lives, the new application then gets spin up, and then it like gradually moves people over. And if there are any issues, then it stops the old deploy, the new deploy. But then if everything's all fine, it then moves everyone over to the new deploy and then tears down the old one. I'm 90% sure that's what happens by default. I saw there was a question as well.
Layer on top of. Do you know if it's a layer just on top of like cloud formation, basically?
So I think what it is it's a layer on top of like Pulumi and Terraform. So it's like on top of another set of like infrastructure as code toolings that's a bit more like lower level. Again, like 9% sure. Like I don't want to speak on behalf of like the SST team because I might be wrong with some of the intricate details here, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. And there is this like SST directory, which again, like has your Pulumi templates here. So I'm sure if I looked into this, it would have like your configurations and all sorts of things. And I think Pulumi. Oh, okay. I've never used Pulumi before, so I am just going to use Google instead. So Pulumi is like an infrastructure as code tool. So again, like I think it's an alternative to Terraform. So you basically write what infrastructure you want, have it as code, and then run a script that then deploys it to AWS. And so that's what SST is like built on top of that, with like DX on top. Nice DX. Cool. Any questions or cool? Shoot. Yeah.
So, press anything? So like I am about to be deploying a SvelteKit app and was looking at SST.
Oh, cool.
So I'm excited about this, but one of the things that was worrying me was just I'm concerned. I don't know anything about AWS, and I know a lot about. I've used Vercel and Heroku and more managed platforms.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, should I be worried about something that I not expected happening? So let's like either some stack trace that happens during deploy, you have no idea what it is, or just you run it in some way and change the configuration, and it's left some old version of an Amazon EC2 instance there, and you only realize 2 months later, and you now be even charged £400 for it. I guess what I'm asking is it like a magic abstraction that in your experience just works really well and makes AWS more managed, or is it a leaky abstraction that has causes problems?
So so let's go all the way back here. So it's like kind of like this nice spot in the middle, and obviously this is completely arbitrary. Look, this thing doesn't actually mean anything, but it's kind of like not completely abstracted away. But then if you have like a bit of working knowledge with AWS, it should be like straightforward to get running with. I have run into a few gotchas in the past. Namely, like if you are running your deployment script, and then for some reason maybe like your code editor crashes, or you kind of cancel it by accident or something, there can be like a bit of not corruption, but a bit of like your infrastructure might hang. So you then need to like just I have a couple times had to like go into AWS and like turn off my or like tear down manually some infrastructure. So I'd say like maybe like spin up a hobby project, try it out. I think the documentation's really good in that it can help you get something up and running nice and quickly. And then like as you're building up that little like mini like a hobby project or a little what's the word I'm looking for? Just like your pardon, sorry? MVP, yeah. Maybe not like the MVP, more just like a proof of concept is what I meant to say, yeah. That will help you maybe get familiar with some of the more like tricky things that might trip you up down the line.
Cool. So I guess what I'm getting from that is a good tool for someone who would be happy using AWS if they had to, but would prefer not to, rather than for someone who's terrified of using AWS and just wants it to go away.
I think that's like the perfect tagline, and I reckon you reach out to the SST guys and they have that in their on their website. But I think like if you're happy to like expose yourself a little bit to the complexities of AWS, then that like might be an option. But again, like you saw here, this is kind of at least again, don't want to speak on behalf of the SST folks, but this is kind of like the minimum you need to get your SvelteKit application running. They also have like actually, if I go over to SST.dev, I look for SvelteKit. They have like a serverless infrastructure kit that makes it a bit more stripped back. So where is it? There's something here. basically. So
I was saying that it's even easier on an SST setup if you're going to have SvelteKit as an SSG sort of with a serverless function.
oh yeah, so
for
like
the
you
backend,
compile everything
not
down to a
Docker.
static site. And then,
Yeah, they have an extension that you can
Oh, awesome.
literally pull in and it
Yeah.
sets up everything.
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah, I have. So good things. It does set up the stack
Yeah.
as one sort of full app, so teardown is much easier. But issues that I have been using it with Terraform in conjunction with
Oh,
it
sure.
for
Yeah.
other stuff. It essentially spins up a whole separate stack, like it's, and you then need to manually do a lot of that back and forth
Yeah.
in order for those to actually work together.
So you did modify the A/B test.
Yeah.
You're saying it's like if stack each time.
Well, it sets up a separate stack. I haven't run it as a Docker image, but I'd imagine it's a similar sort of thing. So from AWS perspective, it's a separate sort of CloudFormation stack with all the different things that you need.
Because I know that they have ways for you to then like define, use Terraform to define things that maybe the SST API doesn't cover. Is that what you're saying? And then trying to get that to communicate with one another.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine
Yeah.
if you delve deep into SST, you could probably link things together.
Yeah.
But if you're deploying one bit as Terraform and the other as SST, because you can't be bothered to server-side render your SvelteKit app via Terraform, because it is a pain in the
I've had issues with like just learning Terraform in the past. So
yeah, it is. It is a bit hard.
Quite a high bar to get something up and running. Yeah. So any more questions before I kind of like wrap up a little bit? But what's your? Because I know that you sounded like kind of like on the fence a little bit. Like, do you kind of have an idea now as to what you want leaning towards, or?
I think I'm probably going to give it a shot.
Yeah.
I'd quite like to use Zero.
Oh, okay.
Which works best on, and I listened to a podcast about someone using SST to deploy that, so I'm going to give that a shot.
Okay, that's interesting. Nice. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask a question because you mentioned that like there were times where you had to, like, the deploy got interrupted midway and you had to like delete some infrastructure and stuff like that. So does SST have any sort of sense of state management?
Yeah, for sure. I think the way it works, let me just jump on here on the website, is that they basically have kind of track the state locally on your computer. Then I think there's also like a description of the state on the cloud as well, so it can kind of see if like they're in sync or they're out of sync, and then it tries to like kind of reconcile them if something's kind of gone a bit awry. Again, like 90% sure that's what the docs said, but don't hold me to that. I'm not liable if the information I provided is incorrect and it brings down your infrastructure. Oh, yes, cool. Nice. State file locally tracks your infrastructure and then does a diff with what's deployed. So I guess it's, so it does a diff with the state and only deploy what's changed. State file in your race. Okay, well, I'll read this later because I don't want to read it all now here. But yeah, exactly. So when you deploy, cool. So one thing that I find quite interesting, and this is going off topic a little bit, is how they, let's say here, the sections here aren't defined by say like a logical grouping or alphabetical. It's like grouped by like the length of the word, which are very interesting. I want to know how that happened and opening the PR for that and convincing people to do that. That's just a funny little thing there. Anyway, back to the talk. This is why I only did one half of the talk, because I'm already 40 minutes in and have another half to go. No, this is literally the last slide. So like I mentioned, we had a mobile application and a server that we wanted to then migrate to a brand new one because it was not like the most stable thing. The application was just like a little bit buggy, but we didn't want to like scare our client and basically be like, we're going to just do everything in a massively different way. We're going to want to use your same kind of like some of the similar tooling that you're using, but we're going to suggest some different ways of doing things. So using SST to deploy to AWS was like a nice middle ground. So again, not dealing with Terraform, but then not moving over to a different platform altogether. The DX has been great. I've onboarded a couple of developers onto the project after starting it up. And once you've set up your AWS account, SST works really nicely. Secret management, I find, is baked in really nicely. And they've done a great job on making sure that's nice and easy. I've had like bad experiences with secret management in the past. It can be a bit of a pain. So it's nice when something kind of just works. And again, like you can deploy things with like small amount of configuration, but again, you can go quite deep if you wanted as well. So this is part 2 now, adding the real-time aspect, but I'm so over time, it's 8 o'clock already. So I will leave it at that. I also don't actually have a slide for anything after this. So yeah, if you're interested in the real-time aspect, then please reach out. If you have any questions about SST or SvelteKit, feel free to throw them my way.
Can I just add, for people that haven't used SST, SST does deploy a bootstrap stack onto your account in order for it to actually get your current stack in. So if it shouldn't charge, but generally it's a good idea to, if you drop that stack, to just move your bootstrap stack.
That's a good point, actually. Like one thing I've forgotten to do is like I've spun it up and then I've like forgotten about a month that I had something going on.
It doesn't use any resources. It's just sitting there.
Exactly. And if you're using like an EC2, if you're running an EC2 server, then you know, you're probably going to be charged like £10 a month or something. So so you're only really being charged as much as it would cost normally on AWS. There's no like added cost or markup or anything. Cool. Did you have a question as well, or? Okay. Anyone got a question or? Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I better fill while Willow gets set up. You can have. Do you want this one? You can use that one. Okay. So we did this all well in advance, so this is just going to be super smooth. Why do you have a flipper 0 there? Nice. Oh, excellent. Oh, Willow, I need to do this stuff. We're just waiting for Willow to join. I can still see Enrico's. Oh, here we go. So, what do I highlight? Is it highlight? This one?
And then tabbing it.
Is that it? Yay. Is that your screen?
Hello world. Yes.
All right, I'll turn this off. All right. Hey, start! Thank you.
Okay, I think we should be good. Hello, everyone. This is going to be a talk about myth busting the Svelte ecosystem and also maybe a small tutorial on Svelte 5. If you were at JS Monthly a couple weeks ago, I gave this talk. It is the same sort of spiritual thing. It's completely different. This is no script. Last time I threw the slides out. This time, maybe I'll throw them out, is to be seen. So first of all, we're going to learn Svelte 5-ish. I'm just curious, how many people here have used Svelte before? And then how many people have used Svelte 5? Okay, cool. And then we're going to do some myth busting. That's the most important bit, I think, but it's also maybe the shortest bit, so let's find out. And we're going to try and live code this. I'm a little worried that poor Linux can't handle it, but we'll see. Okay. Can you see that okay? Cool. So this is a Svelte REPL on, or Playground as it's now called, on the website. It's works pretty well. You can import stuff, you can do most things. We're just going to use this until it breaks. Last time it broke pretty quickly. Maybe this time it won't. So as most of you know, in Svelte you have sort of 3 parts to your component. Unlike React, it's not JSX, so we're using templating. It's sort of HTML plus. I can go on the internet and I could find like an SVG and I could pop it in here and it would work. I could put some HTML. There are some slight differences, as we'll get onto. But in general, we have the script tag at the top, we have our body, and then we have our style. And in Svelte, style is scoped. So if I take this p tag, I can color it, and it's only going to affect the p tags in this component. It's not going to leak outside. It's not going to affect other things on your page. Now, to tie this back to the ecosystem, what makes this great is that out of the box, we get sort of encapsulation. And I can take this Svelte component, put it on a website, and progressively enhance it, say an old, even like a WordPress website if I wanted, and add Svelte to it without really affecting other parts of the page. I could even compile this to a web component instead of using like the Svelte mounting syntax. We can add JavaScript to this. So in Svelte, you can track state with just by saying let count is 0. Now, the difference here with Svelte 5 is that we need to tell Svelte this is reactive. The reason this was done is because one of the sort of core parts of Svelte is this sort of magical vibe, but the creator, Rich Harris, felt that maybe we stepped too far in one direction, and we wanted to sort of bring it back and unlock some more performance by having an additional syntax here, just to be more like tell Svelte what we mean more than just having to infer it. This comes with the declarative. I'm not very good at all these buzzwords. Yeah, so the main benefit here is that there's no confusion. Like I can look at this and I'm like, okay, this is definitely state. And I can take this and put it in another file and it's still state, as long as it's a svelte.ts file or svelte.js file. And I can render this on the page and say like count is this, and hopefully you can see that says the count is 0. And that's great and all, but I need to like change it, right? And so it makes this easy. I can take a button and say like click me, and all I have to do is in this onClick handler, which looks exactly like it would in vanilla HTML, except these little curly brackets here, pass in a function, and all I have to do is increment the count, and then it works. And I could take this count and we can put it in another file here, say counter.svelte.js, and we can create this sort of counter class here. And we need to create this sort of wrapper here, because when you import something, you can't mutate it directly. And so we effectively boxing it, although that term is a wee bit controversial in the Svelte Discord at the moment, I think. We can just say counter is state here. And if we just export a singleton, we can then come back into our app.svelte, import this. And then just update. Yeah. Oh. Count. There we go. And it still works. And whereas in Svelte 4 or 3, you'd have to start messing around with stores. Now you don't. You can just sort of, your reactivity can go across these boundaries very simply. And we can create these sort of patterns with these classes. And say we want to prevent someone from updating this count. Well, we can do that too. We can create a private variable. In TypeScript, you could use the private syntax, or you can use this little hashtag, which is a JavaScript feature, to make this private. And then we can make a getter. Return this dot hashtag count. Now, this still displays the count because we have a getter, but there's no setter here. We can't update it. So we could fix that by adding a setter. Get count, new count. And then this should just work again. And this allows you to be very deliberate with how you control your access to things, which I think is very important in bigger teams, because then it's less likely for people to be able to make mistakes, especially when you bring in TypeScript and you're very strict about your type checking. Then it's going to be difficult to have sort of silly mistakes enter your code base and weird behavior. So I guess, does anyone have any questions about Svelte, any direction?
Thank you, no worries. And when inputting a script module, and putting state management in the module.
So the question was, what's the difference between using the script tag here and then putting stuff in the script module, right?
That's right.
So this used to be called context or module, I believe, or type, but now it's just script module. This is valuable if you want to export stuff from your Svelte component, because under the hood, when this gets compiled, it's going to be export on the default. If you're familiar with modern JavaScript import, you have named exports. For example, I could say export const name is Svelte London with a typo. And this is a named import. So I just import it like this. This would be name, right? And you have default where you don't have these brackets and you just import it and you name it what you like. Svelte generates all the components on the default export. So this script module allows you to export your own stuff from the same file. This can be useful if you just want to have, if it's simple and everything is in the same file, you don't really feel like there's a need to split it up. But I usually do this, and then as stuff gets more complicated, you can sort of break it out into its own file or files if you want. Yeah.
Also allow you to share state between other components of this type.
Can you rephrase that?
So if you put some state in the script module, I think, or it used to work, other components of the same type could use the same state.
Yes, but I wouldn't necessarily rely on that. It's not necessarily functionally different to what we have now, where you can, put state in another file. You just have to keep in mind that in any of these situations that this could break depending on if you're like manually dynamically importing stuff, or like there's hard refreshes and stuff. So, and all state you know, is in memory, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, makes sense.
Can we just just being able to talk and type.
Yeah.
I'm very tight. So.
Yeah, it's extra. It's not as bad as I expected because I can't see this screen. I can only see this screen. Okay, so we'll move on. We've done that. The ecosystem. Now, I hear a lot of people when they talk about, like on Reddit or Discord, they're like, "Oh, I love Svelte. I love this thing, but it has a smaller ecosystem, so I can't use it." And I guess the point of this talk is I think that isn't a real reason. Yeah. I don't know if we can. I guess we can swear on YouTube, right? But Svelte, you're right. Yes, Svelte does have less packages. And yeah, okay, fair. I couldn't check. This is just using a simple name search. It's not 100% accurate. I mean, I'd be kind of scared if it was, because I feel like React would have even more. But it's okay, because the benefit of Svelte isn't just Svelte, it's the entire JavaScript ecosystem at large. What's my next slide? Okay, we have two points to this. Sort of libraries is the more important one, I think, in this context, and then tooling. So with libraries, okay, whatever. The point I want to make is that with Svelte, it's easier than other frameworks necessarily to integrate vanilla libraries into it. And this means that that library that is perfectly good, that's untyped, annoyingly, that was written 10 years ago, you can just integrate that. As an example, I was building a TV app with Svelte, and I needed sort of spatial navigation where you can use like your arrow keys to navigate around. And I really, really, really did not want to code that myself. And so I spent probably 20 minutes on NPM, and I found one written by the BBC like 4 years ago, imported it into Svelte, and it worked great. And it would be more annoying to do that with other frameworks. And so what I want to do is just sort of prove this with some more live coding. If nobody else has any suggestions, we're just gonna do Code Mirror for the fun of it, because I did this recently and it was easier than I expected, even though their documentation isn't amazing. So okay, we go to the Code Mirror website and we're like, go to the docs, okay, and we're just gonna pretend that AI doesn't exist and couldn't do this for us, because that would defeat the purpose of this talk a little bit. Oh, look, we got some code. Let's just copy paste this, I guess. And this brings me on to another point. Okay, whatever. I'm gonna jump the gun here, and we're gonna do tooling a little bit. If I just pop into this directory, we can use this command called SV.
Great save, let me fix that. That happened to me earlier as well.
Wait down a bit.
How's it the other way around from the bottom up?
Oh my god.
Okay, so one second.
Just take the laptop off. Right.
So yeah, I thought the other way around. So,
For YouTube's benefit, the stands just absolutely failed miserably.
Okay. That was the save. Yeah.
I didn't need a laptop anyway. Right.
Maybe like tilt this up a little bit. So okay, no. I'm really sorry. What's going on? Oh, okay, that's fine.
Right, so I'm lucky.
Right in there. Right, and then tilt this up. Yeah, tilt that up a little bit. That's what I meant.
Yeah. Apparently this stand doesn't like PNPX SV. Okay, so This is the nice new CLI. It used to be pnpm create svelte. This doesn't do anything anymore because we have this lovely one. And for those of you who knew what svelte add was, this is made by sort of the successor to that. Basically makes your life much easier if you want to add like tailwind for some reason, or like some like drizzle or whatever. Yeah, maybe. Yes, you can do it after the fact. And so yeah, SV create, we'll create this and we'll just call it no more laptop. Right, so we're just going to select minimal for this. This is a fun little Wordle-esque demo game, or this is a library. If you were writing Svelte like 4 years ago and you were making a library, the amount of hours this has saved you today is ridiculous. Writing a roll-up config is not enjoyable. Right, and then we're going to get loads of options. This is all start add, so if I forget, if I'm like, oh shit, I forgot to select Lucia, then I can just add it afterwards and it will work great. But we'll just select prettier and we'll like ignore tailwind. This isn't going to work, don't worry about it. So if we just install, if we just cd and then we install, this is created a SvelteKit app for us, and this is basically the best path forward with Svelte. And see previous talk if you want to know how to deploy it. Come on, pnpm. Thank you. Right. So we can just run pnpm dev. And then, okay, rid of that. Yeah, I'm much closer to it than you are. Right, let's open it in our fun Rust-based text editor of choice. And then, hopefully, there we go. Can everyone read this? Okay. Sweet. So if we run pnpm dev again, then we can open this up here. And we did it. Yay. So we're going to have the same setup as before. We have our script tag and do you know how much time I have? Oh, okay, we'll be fine then. Okay, so we have this script. The only difference is we're going to use TypeScript because that is the only acceptable option. And I'm going to introduce you to this concept called actions. If you're familiar with CodeMirror or really any vanilla JavaScript library, it's going to require access to an element. Now, we're not going to have to like use refs or anything here. We have two choices. We have the ref-like experience where we can sort of bind the element to a variable, or we can use what's called an action. And I think this is the better choice usually, so that's what we're going to do here. And an action is simply just a function, so we'll call it CodeMirror, that takes in a node, and this will be like a HTML element. Now, this will only run on the client side. So if you have server-side rendering, it's not going to do anything, and it's just, you can't do that because you need access to this node, right? So we can do anything in here. We could set like the inner text to hello world. And then what we do is we create our element here. Say let's do this on a p tag for now. Hello. We can then use this use block. We say use CodeMirror. And then if I come over to here, we see it says hello world because at runtime, this has injected this JavaScript that has run this code here. Now, we can do two more things here. We can return this object that can have two functions. We have destroy, which is what you use to run cleanup work, because especially in dev, you'll probably notice it the most. But anytime, for example, you change page in SvelteKit, by default, it's not going to server-side render it every time. It's going to client-side render it after the initial load. So you have, theoretically, your users have a much snappier experience. But this means that components are going to be mounted and unmounted constantly. And if we're not cleaning up, there's going to be a lot of stuff running in the background here. In the case of CodeMirror, maybe it's not a big problem, but if you have like a set timeout or something that's running all the time, it's going to cause a lot of problems, memory leaks, bad user experience. And then the other thing we have is the update. Now, this is how actions are reactive, because what gets passed in here is this other concept of options. So this is the second argument, and this is just going to be like a string or an object or an array, really whatever you like. Let's just say it's the type, let's just say it's a text with a string on it. And then we want to set this string to options.text. When this function is called, we get the new options object, which has the same type of text string. We can then rerun our code with these new options. And it's up to you how you handle that. It's sort of, it really depends on what you're integrating. So in this case, we could just set this to options.text. And Svelte handily provides us a type here called action to, what is this? Problem solved. I'm sure I did something wrong and it was trying to be helpful, but unfortunately I don't care. So we can let's just set up a little thing here and create a little input. So we'll introduce another concept here, which is the bind value. This is just making our life much easier and saying, hey, Svelte, bind the value attribute of this input to this text field. This is instead of having to have like an on change and then also set the value yourself, just makes it much easier. And then if we save this, we now have an input. And we can say, so if we say the text is just hi, you see it's just statically like nothing is changing. But then I can pass in this text here. Hello. Apparently it's not fine. Live debugging, I was hoping to avoid this.
We're all here with you.
I think this is why Claude was invented, but aren't you all clever? Ta-da! Woo! Well, TypeScript didn't save me there, so maybe I should stop shilling it so hard. Okay, so we have this, it's updating, and that's the example. To quickly just sort of round this bit off and integrate CodeMirror, we need to install these packages. And so we'll just open up a new terminal here. And here's one I made earlier. I thought PNPM was supposed to be faster. Okay, there we go. So if we take this, and then we just destroy all of our hard work here. And instead of using a P, we'll just use a div. We will use a div. And we'll do the same thing, use code mirror, and then we'll just sort of grab this code here. We don't need this anymore because we're not having options because we are in control. And then we just need to do these imports. And then the only thing we need to change from this example is just saying what the node is. And then to avoid causing problems, we'll do the destroy function. And then usually it's like dispose or destroy. There we go. So if we refresh this, we now have code mirror. And we could even come in here and do like line numbers, make it more readable. Here we go. And even HMR is working, and it's reloading, and it's destroying itself, and it's cleaning up. Yeah. So to finish off this, we have tooling. I just want to quickly mention explaining the deep and complex history of Svelte tooling is a lot, but we're in the good days. We've made it. We have everything we care about. We have TypeScript, we have Vite, we have PNPM, we have CSS, and we have web standards. I'm using the WinterTC logo here just because the point I want to make is that with SvelteKit, we're all in on standards where possible. So we're using the request response model that's the same. I can use Hono, I could use Remix for React, I could use frameworks like this. And not only are they going to be using Vite, but they're going to be using the same models. So I can keep a lot of my code sort of vendor agnostic. And this all comes back to progressively enhancing your apps. Nobody's saying rewrite your entire stack in SvelteKit because you can't afford to do that. We're saying make new tools, build new things, take an active interest in not only improving your developer experience, but improving your user experience with Svelte's faster and smaller footprint. So yeah, last but not least, come to Svelte Summit. Some of us will be there. It'll be great. The last one was like 2021, I think. I remember it's when the Queen died. So, you know, that's a good or bad omen, depending how you look at it. Go to CityJS. I don't have a slide for this. There is a 20% discount basically permanently existing. So reach out to one of us. We'll get you one. Rich is going to be there and give a talk. His talk's always super poetic and really interesting. So it's not like you don't want to miss it if you're in London. So yeah, there's the slides. If you're interested, feel free to follow me on Blue Sky. Do you have any questions?
I never knew about the like that actions. Like I've been using like I've been using the kind of like harder way where I think I had to like target the element on mount or something, and
Yes.
yeah, so thank you for sharing that. That's a really handy tool that's going to save lots of code and possible bugs in the future.
I didn't know it's called an action. I just think of actions as form action.
Right, yeah. This is SvelteKit feature form actions. So this is what you'd have to do if you were doing it without actions. It gets very verbose, and this isn't without adding TypeScript, you know. And don't shoot me for not using an effect, but we'll just use on mount here.
Yeah.
So much worse.
Great example. On action. Sorry, I've always called it on. Is the click outside? That's a really good use case for it, isn't it? Other things are like thinking about with the CSS as well. So the what's the auto expand? details,
Mm.
that's always janky. And it is though, isn't it? It just
Yeah.
flicks out, and you could try and use the Svelte animations, but it's not quite right. But with the on action, you can dig into the CSS from the node and do all the funky stuff with that, can't you?
Svelte transitions are also very close to actions under the hood as well. I know they got rewritten to use Web Animation API in Svelte 5. So I haven't looked at the source for that, but I believe they're still very similar. And yeah, and that's another great point, is that actions are very portable. I've written a few, like for example, a copy to clipboard action. Ideally, it's nice and simple. It's just navigator.clipboard.write text, but in reality, there's still a silly amount of browsers and edge cases where you have to use the very verbose old method. And I really did not feel like writing that 100 times. So I contributed to the JavaScript ecosystem again and made a package for it. And that's just an action. So all you have to do is import copy, and it just works. It's great. Any more questions? Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil, for that.
No problem. Are you saying anything again, or are we done?
No,